Good morning, everybody. It is 7 o'clock. You are very welcome to join us on The Breakfast Show here on Sky News this Tuesday morning. Much more needs to be done. The warning from the energy regulator Ofgem to companies it's accused of failing vulnerable customers. Speaking to the boss of Ofgem later this hour as they tell suppliers to do better ahead of a difficult winter. What about the football? Some of you may be waking up to a sore head after Wales and England were through to the World Cup campaigns, off to a very good start. Gareth Bale's late penalty was enough to earn Wales a draw against the USA, while England beat Iran 6-2. You know all this, don't you? But there were no rainbow armbands, and even more controversy last night with reports that Welsh fans were stopped from wearing rainbow hats to the game. We're live in Qatar, Tuesday, 22nd of November. Named and shamed, the energy regulator Ofgem hits out at suppliers, accusing them of failing vulnerable customers ahead of a challenging winter. Celebration amid controversy. Wales draw their opening World Cup game, while England thrash Iran in a fixture marked by protest. Drama off and on the field. There are reports that some Welsh supporters had their rainbow-coloured hats confiscated before the match.
It's a fresh controversy here in Doha after FIFA threats forced Gareth Bale and Harry Kane to abandon plans to wear One Love armbands.
Another blow to the Red Arrows. Its commanding officer is removed from post following allegations of an inappropriate relationship. Hundreds of schools in England lose their outstanding grade after being inspected for the first time in years. A race against time. Rescuers search for survivors amongst the rubble after an earthquake kills more than 160 people on Indonesia's main island of Java. Historic state visit. South African President Cyril Ramaphosa will become the first world leader to be hosted by the king since his mother's funeral. Talk to Ukraine's ambassador to the UK after nuclear experts visit the country, and people are warned of winter of blackouts following Russian attacks on energy infrastructure.
Football, football, football. Football, 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 go. I think it's all over. Football.
Eggsy from the Welsh rap group Goldie Looking Chain joins us as they release an unofficial anthem for all football. Morning, everyone. We'll have the latest from the World Cup in Qatar very shortly. Plenty to talk about with our correspondent there. But first, the energy regulator Ofgem has told 17 suppliers they must improve their approach to vulnerable customers as we head into a very tough winter. Ofgem said failings included customers missing out on free gas safety checks, vulnerable customers not being offered the support that they need, and ensuring those on prepayment meters are identified and supported. Although some good practice was identified, all 17 suppliers need to make further improvements. Good Energy, Outfox, SO Energy, True Energy and Utilita were judged the worst by Ofgem. We'll have more on that with the Chief Exec of Ofgem in just a few moments here on the programme. But first, let's tell you what's happening with the World Cup. And Wales and England have got their World Cup campaigns off to a good start. Jude Bellingham and Bukayo Saka led the way as England thrashed Iran 6-2. Wales left it late. As you know, Gareth Bale's 82nd minute penalty. Let's get more on this, should we? Rob is standing by for us. Hi, Rob. A very good morning to you. So the team did well on the pitch. Lots of controversy off the pitch.
Yeah, the former Wales captain, Laura McAllister, had a rainbow bucket hat confiscated from her. You see a lot of the Wales fans with these bucket hats. It's one of the things they like to bring to tournaments. And yet, this is another sign of the conflict between FIFA's promise that all fans will be welcome here and how that message gets right through to the ground, to all the local security officials and the police. Because we've been talking about it quite a lot. This country has those anti-LGBT laws with same-sex relations banned. And while FIFA and the Qatari authorities had insisted rainbow flags and symbols would be accepted here. We've seen a number of cases where actually it's led to fans and media even running into some sort of conflict with those security. We had a journalist, an American journalist, who was wearing a rainbow T-shirt. He was detained briefly for doing so. He wasn't allowed into the stadium. And that instant, going into the Wales game last night against the United States, Laura McAllister, the former Wales captain, she said she was told it was a banned symbol and it was taken off her. FIFA say they've apologised to her, but what we're yet to hear is what are they going to do to ensure actually this does not happen to other fans at this tournament.
Yeah. And just, I mean, this time yesterday, we thought that the home nations captains were going to be wearing their One Love armbands. That didn't happen. Suggestions in the papers here in the UK this morning that the Qatari government has had something to do with that. What are you hearing?
Well, while publicly FIFA aren't saying anything about any involvement from the Qatari government in that decision, we already know that they have had a big influence on how FIFA are running this tournament, because they had planned to be selling alcohol outside stadiums this time last week. We heard the plans, despite the fact that alcohol is not widely available in public spaces at all. An exemption was going to be made for this World Cup. Then on Friday, they suddenly said that actually, to avoid any potential issues around the games, they wouldn't have alcohol there. And that was clearly something that came right from the top of Qatar, because they're a FIFA sponsor. And I did actually ask the FIFA president, Gianni Infantino, on Saturday that if they can go back on those assurances, how can we necessarily take their word on other matters, far more significant matters, particularly about equality and inclusion. So this decision late on by England and Wales to abandon the plans to wear the One Love armbands was something that can, to some people, make FIFA look like they're suppressing a message of tolerance. And certainly England and Wales thought they were being put under immense pressure, that all they wanted to do was promote equality, and yet FIFA were determining that this was not something within their allowed, permitted regulations. And even some suggestions that we had thought maybe it would only be a yellow card for Harry Kane and Gareth Bale if they wore them, that actually FIFA could have launched disciplinary proceedings against England and Wales and those players, and maybe they would have been banned from games. And it really seems that FIFA have actually managed to bring more attention onto this issue, and it sort of goes against their message of trying to sort of promote tolerance and no discrimination. A
couple of other quick points to raise with you. A lot of criticism this morning about David Beckham in the papers and his support for the Qatari government. What's the view there?
Well, obviously here they see him as a sort of face of the country, someone who's helping to promote Qatar, but I think they know his silence is causing issues. In fact, the only thing we seem to talk about David Beckham these days is his ambassador's deal with Qatar, and just the sort of association with the country, and whether it actually is a deal that he should have taken, particularly when he's talked up over many years about LGBT rights. And yet, of course, this, as we say, is a country which just suppresses LGBT freedoms and the right to have same-sex relations. And we are seeing him at games, we're seeing him celebrating, for instance, at the England game, and we're still waiting to actually hear from him, just to talk about even his association with Qatar. But we see many groups obviously questioning why he took the deal.
Indeed. But let's finish on the football, should we? Who do England and Wales play next?
Well, for England next, it is the United States. They also played them at the 2010 World Cup when they drew their World Cup opener there. And for Wales, it's Iran. And, you know, they'll be hoping, particularly having seen the performance by England against Iran, that maybe there's some hope for them to get their win at this World Cup, which could help them in terms of progressing. Then, of course, it all builds up to the big finale in Group B when we get England against Wales. Will something still be at stake in that match for both teams? Will they have secured their passage already? And today is a day, actually, with Argentina in action, when we hope to see Lionel Messi. Will he finally win a World Cup as one of the world's best players? That's the big trophy missing from his cabinet.
Yeah, I think I read this morning Lionel Messi in his debut for Argentina was sent off after 45 seconds. Let's see what happens today. Thanks so much indeed for now, Rob. Thank you. And lots of excitement, of course, yesterday. 6 goals for England. The last one scored, I should say, by the midfielder Jack Grealish. And he still managed to keep his promise to an 11-year-old boy called Finley, who he met earlier this year. Have a quick look.
do this.
You want to do this?
Yeah.
All right, I'll do that for you, all right?
All right.
I promise. But remember, I've got to score, though.
Next time
I score, yeah? All right, then. I'll do that for you. So what is it, just like this, yeah?
Yeah.
All right, deal. Come here.
Grealish celebrating his goal with the dance that he planned with Finlay. Finlay, who has cerebral palsy, met the England player after writing to him to say he was inspired by Grealish, speaking about his younger sister Holly, who also has cerebral palsy. He'd actually asked him whether he would do the worm, and he said, no, I won't, but I'll do this. And indeed, he did, which was fantastic, and he scored a goal. And if you can scan your QR code on the screen, here it comes. There it is. You can listen to the latest edition of the Sky News Daily podcast, looking into the World Cup armbands row and speaking to LGBT plus football fans about why they believe the sport has scored an own goal. Also still to come on the programme for you, joined by the former International Trade Secretary and Tory MP, Liam Fox. The energy regulator has accused suppliers of failure across the board. Speaking to Ofgem's Director of Retail, Neil Lawrence, later this hour. Labour's Shadow Business Secretary, Jonathan Reynolds, will be joining us shortly after 8 o'clock. Before all of that, though, let me tell you what's happening in Indonesia. A story that was breaking as we were going off air yesterday morning. Rescue efforts underway for survivors of the earthquake there, which has killed at least 162 people. The governor of West Java said many of the dead were children killed while taking extra lessons after the end of their school day. The main area affected is the Sinjar region in the west of Java. Nicole has more.
Flattened buildings and mountains of concrete. The aftermath of a 5.6 magnitude earthquake that struck the island of Java. Dozens of people have been killed and hundreds injured as rescuers search for survivors. Homes were not built to withstand the force of a quake like this.
I was crying and immediately grabbed my husband and children. If I didn't pull them out, we might have become victims. The house was shaking as if it was dancing.
It struck near the town of Cianjur in the middle of the day. The local governor says schools were hit hard and most of those killed were children. Field hospitals have been set up in the streets, everywhere survivors, in the middle of this chaotic, crowded community.
Most suffered a broken bone or were injured because of falling objects and incision wounds. And there were also around 13,784 evacuees.
Crews worked through the night to save lives. There's been dozens of aftershocks and access is difficult in remote areas. With roads blocked by landslides, people are bracing themselves for a large number of dead. This country is no stranger to earthquakes. It's in an area known as the Pacific Ring of Fire, one of the most active regions in the world for volcanic eruptions and tremors. The trauma of this one will linger as the enormity of this disaster sinks in. Nicole Johnston, Sky News.
Well, joining us now is Dr. Liam Fox, previously a member of the government, Conservative MP for North Somerset. So much to talk to you about. I wonder if I might be able to ask you about energy bills, if that's OK. We're just hearing from Ofgem that vulnerable customers are being ripped off by big energy companies in all sorts of ways. I'm sure that some of your constituents are going to be affected by that, not least those that are on prepayment meters. Is there anything you can do about it?
Well, I think it's something that the big energy companies need to look at. The government, the taxpayers, you and I, are putting in a lot of money to help, especially those on lower incomes. And I think the energy companies need to be doing the same to make sure that tariffs and charges are as fair as possible and that the money that the taxpayers are putting in will therefore go as far as possible.
Yeah. Do you think the government is doing enough? I mean, there were some suggestions that the government shouldn't get involved in I mean, obviously they're coming up with a lot of money, but they shouldn't get involved in support schemes to help customers because that was too much of a nanny state. Given that we're hearing from Ofgem that, for example, people on prepayment meters are just suffering at the hands of several of these energy companies, Is it an area where the government should perhaps look at that again?
Well, I think it's something that Parliament will want to look at. I'm sure that select committees will want to look at whether the public money that's being put in, an extra 26 billion that the government announced last week, which is more than half of our defence budget, to put that in perspective, that needs to be used properly. So I think that the Parliament, all MPs will want to ensure that that money is being used in an effective way to help those, especially at lower income levels.
Your previous Prime Minister said that we would be helping people with energy caps for 2 years. The new Chancellor has said we'll look at it again in April. Is that right?
Well, it depends on what, of course, is happening to energy prices. The reason that we're having this high level of support is because of the Russian invasion of Ukraine and how that pushed up oil and gas prices around the world. If those prices start to fall again, clearly we don't want to be having taxpayer subsidy where we don't really need to have that because we've got lots of other priorities where we could be spending that money. So it's always a balance about where the government uses taxpayers' money. You don't want to be putting subsidies in unnecessarily, but the government will look at it and see where we need to target that support. We've seen some evidence of those global prices in oil and gas beginning to fall again, but it's anyone's guess over the winter what will happen. We don't know how severe the winter in Europe will be, what demand will be, and what that will do for prices. None of us can predict that.
Something that is an area of expertise for you, of course, is Brexit. We're hearing from senior European figures saying it's wishful thinking that we could get closer to the EU when it comes to trade deals with a special deal, without agreeing to free movement of people.
Yeah, I'm sure they're right. And I think this idea of, first of all, I think politically reopening the debate on Brexit is the very last thing that we need at the present time. And this talk about a Swiss relationship, you know, for the Swiss, they have to pay into the European budget, they have to accept free movement of people, and they have to accept European laws over which they've got no control. I don't see that as being in line in any way, shape or form with the spirit of our referendum or our exit from the European Union. I think it's a political non-starter. It's a waste of everybody's energy, and we should just get on with the job in hand.
You say get on with the job in hand, but we don't have enough people to get on with the job in hand. There are hundreds of millions of job vacancies. I think 1.5 million job vacancies at the moment.
Yes, and we also have a very large number of people who are out of work, or an even bigger number of people who are not economically active.
So what are we going to do with them?
So one of the interesting things about the budget, and something that a lot of us have been talking about, is why is it so many people have chosen not to work? As we know, a lot of people from the age 55 bracket onwards have chosen not to work since the pandemic. I think we need to try to understand why that is, and try to find if we can find attractive ways to bring these people back into the economy, whether that's part-time or otherwise. Then I think the other thing to remember about Brexit and immigration is this, that we are needing to deal with illegal immigration. But the point of Brexit wasn't to stop immigration, it was to give us control of immigration. And I think that where there are areas of the economy where we need more skilled people more quickly, then I think that we should use those freedoms of Brexit to try to achieve that. The whole point of Brexit was to give us back control. It wasn't to have any one policy imposed upon us.
Two questions as a result of what you said there. If the government tries to make coming back to work for the over 55s more attractive, and that doesn't work, do you go for less attractive ways to get them to come back to work?
No, I think you try to encourage people back into the workforce.
What if they don't,
you can't force people into the workforce. This is a free country, and if people choose not to work, and they've got the savings, for example.
Yeah, but you can look at their benefits, can't you?
Well, if people have savings and they're not on benefits, for example, they're entitled not to work if they can afford to do so. People have put money aside. I think we want to try to encourage more people back into that workforce, because if we don't have the domestic workforce, you've got two choices. The jobs don't get done, or you have to bring them in from elsewhere. And people need to have to, I think, as a national conversation, we need to decide, which of these options is most attractive to us. We do need to have a growing economy, and that means a workforce that's becoming either bigger or more productive, or both. But if we can't do that domestically, we can't just leave the jobs unfilled. No,
but we need a more skilled workforce, as you were saying there. That takes time. There are skilled workers in Europe who could come and fill those jobs for now.
Yes, and if as I said, the point of Brexit was to give us control over migration. And if we need...
So you're not rejecting that idea to bring skilled workers, more skilled workers from
Europe? No, I'm absolutely not. And I think that we need to use our freedoms to be able to use those powers to be able to match the requirements of our economy with those skills that may exist elsewhere. What we can't have is free movement of people, where people are coming to the UK who may not have the skills that we want, but ultimately become able to use our public services or our benefits.
The PM also said we're in control of our borders now because we are no longer attached to the EU, but we still have to deal with countries like France, don't we, on a daily basis? So we're just picking and choosing.
Well, I think on the question of migration, I think we have to have a wider view, frankly, of what the problem is. And I would say you can break it into three parts. You've got those who are crossing from France into the UK at the present time. France has its own problems because of the Schengen Agreement, the free movement of people in Europe. Effectively, if you can get into the southern border of Greece, you can get to Calais because there are no restrictions across European borders. And then we've got a very big global problem, largely, I think, because of the pandemic, where you've had a lot of people who have been displaced economically by the pandemic, looking for a better life. And of course, we live in a world now where if you're a young African with a mobile phone, you can see what prosperity looks like. And if that's being denied to you, you will try to get something better for yourself. I think that's a normal human reaction. I think, therefore, we have to think of the upstream, if you like, elements of that migration problem, including how do we ensure that developing countries get their fair share of prosperity, and that post-pandemic we're not putting them at an economic disadvantage because of elements in the global trading system. It's a problem with a lot of different layers. And I think a lot of the political debate is too simplistic. Complex problems, as I would say as a doctor, seldom have a simple solution to them.
Glad you brought up the fact that you're a doctor. I'm reading in the paper today that Rishi Sunak says that the NHS is in his blood, but he pays £250 to see a doctor as soon as possible. He enrolls in an agency that will do that for him. How does he square that circle to say that, you know, it's in his blood, the NHS is his number one priority, but if he's got an ache or a pain, he can just jump the queue?
Well, he's judged by what he does in terms of public policy.
What do you think?
I think that the government is judged by what it does for the NHS and how much money
do what I
say,
not as I do.
No, the government is judged, and politicians are judged by their public policy and what they do for the NHS. We've seen record sums going into the NHS. The NHS has two particular problems at the present time. Number one is inflation. So even with a big increase being put in, that will eat that up. And the second is we've got a chronic problem in the NHS with people being unable to be discharged from our hospitals.
Yeah, because of the problems with social care.
Well, it's partly that. It's partly, I would also argue, a lack of capacity inside the NHS. Now, it's a long time since I worked in a hospital, but even then, we had a problem with the inability to discharge patients who were perfectly ready to go from acute hospital.
From my point. My point is, should somebody who says that the NHS is in his blood and he's responsible for where the money goes be jumping the queue by paying 250 quid to see a private doctor rather than wasting a fortnight like the rest of us?
Well, it's the Prime Minister and the government are judged by what they do for the NHS.
What do you think?
What they do with their private
that?
money is up to them.
Would you do that?
I don't have private insurance, but I don't in any way think that people should not do that if that's what they choose to do. And remember, everybody does that.
Even if they're the Prime Minister?
Well, and
what does that say about the optics?
Well, anyone is entitled to do that. This is a free country, and it cannot be that we tell some people that they cannot do that. The government is judged by what it's doing for the NHS, and the NHS is getting a lot of extra money. We're trying to deal with those problems of capacity in the NHS, and the fact that the NHS is suffering from a huge number of job vacancies at the present time, which people are not going into. So that's not going to be helped, nor does the debate get helped.
It's some rich bloke who is telling us how to live our lives and taxing us more, and yet he can jump the queue when it suits him.
Well, the Prime Minister's job is to make sure that the public provision of health in this country is as good as it can be. Both his time as Chancellor, now as Prime Minister, we're seeing record sums going into the NHS. That's the job of politicians.
But can you appreciate how that might not sit well with my viewers this morning?
Well, lots of people in this country will choose to use either the savings or private health policies to be able to get private health care. Every time someone does that, it's less strain on the NHS. I mean, if you want to get rid of private healthcare, you'll get an even bigger strain on the NHS. The government's job is to make sure the NHS is well run and is well funded. And under Rishi Sunak and this government, I'm confident it will be.
So you don't think for one second that people will find it, they'll have to hold their nose when they read about this story?
Well, people will get private healthcare through their companies,
Yeah,
through
some people
their
can't
trade
even afford to
unions,
pay their
and through the
bills,
trade
though,
unions in
Doctor.
some cases. So I don't see why that's any different. As I said, the job of the government is to make sure the NHS is well run and it's well funded.
Okay.
And that's what's happening at the present.
OK, now I know Scotland are not in the World Cup. I'm sorry to rub that in. But how did you find the games yesterday?
Well, I'm a little worried that Iran could get 2 goals against England. And I'm a bit...
I think they got 1 goal against Scotland, though, didn't they, last time you played them? And it was a draw.
That is not a bar that I would necessarily apply.
OK.
And I think that the Welsh will be disappointed with the draw. So
OK.
it's going to be an interesting tournament. There's a lot to fight for still.
And who's going to win?
I have no idea.
Argentina?
I really have no idea.
As long as it's not Argentina, frankly.
I don't really have any countries that I don't want to win. And, you know, something that a lot of people have been saying is, can we just talk about the football and not try to politicise
that's what I was trying to do.
Every single bit of it? And if we can get back to sport as sport, so much more helpful. And, you know, if we have fewer TV commentators lecturing us about climate change and immigration and other issues and actually still talk to us about football, I think a lot of viewers will be a lot happier. OK, it's good to talk to you, Doctor, as always. Thanks very much indeed for joining us. Thank you. Quick look at the papers for you this morning in the football, featuring on the front of many of them. The Metro reports on England's World Cup win and praises Iran's players for their protests over the crackdown on anti-government demonstrations at home. Sun has a picture of the opening goal. Jude Bellingham. Yeah, go on, boy. And the Mirror also covers England's win and highlights FIFA's ban on one-love armbands, which a number of captains wanted to wear but decided not to. Current commanding officer of the Red Arrows, let's talk about him. He's been removed from his post following allegations of a relationship with a junior colleague in 2017. Wing Commander David Montenegro will now be the subject of an RAF investigation, though there is no suggestion of sexual abuse or harassment. Emma standing by for us at the MOD this morning. Hi, Emma, what more can you tell us about this story? Good morning.
Hello, Kay. Yes, more bad news for the Red Arrows following news that there'd been an investigation following reports of unacceptable behaviour within the world-renowned aerobatics team, and that had resulted in various disciplinary action, including some dismissals. And now we hear that the administrative head of the Red Arrows, Wing Commander David Montenegro, himself removed from his post following these allegations that he had been involved in an inappropriate relationship with a junior colleague, as reported in the Daily Mail, apparently flown back from a high-profile tour of the Gulf states. And this relates to the time when he was Red 1, which is the most senior pilot within the Red Arrows. Now, there has been a statement from the RAF. And they've said all RAF personnel are expected to maintain the highest standards of behaviour. The RAF is aware of historic allegations from 2017 that have been made against the current officer commanding the RAF aerobatic team, the Red Arrows, which will be thoroughly investigated. Pending that investigation and without prejudice, the individual has been removed from post. We will not be commenting further while the investigation is ongoing. But the RAF have made it clear that there is a clear code of conduct, a document, and that the cohesion of the unit relies on mutual trust and respect. Extensive training is underway within the unit to try and improve the culture there. But as it stands at the moment, the head of the Red Arrows has been suspended from his role while an investigation into his own behaviour is carried out.
OK, Emma, thank you. Also making news for you today, hundreds of schools in England which had been rated outstanding have been downgraded after many were inspected for the first time in more than a decade. Watchdog Ofsted says only 17% of those checked remained in the top tier. Scientists believe they could double the survival of people with advanced cancer within a decade. Experts from the Institute of Cancer Research and the Royal Marsden NHS Foundation Trust said cutting-edge research on what they describe as the cancer ecosystem will mean more people will be cured, while others will live far longer. Supermarkets are taking advantage of customers by charging far higher fuel prices than they should be. The motoring services company, the RAC, says that wholesale costs of fuel have dropped, but prices to customers have not. They want an immediate cut of 5p per litre. Boss of Virgin Atlantic has warned that the Heathrow expansion will be difficult to support unless there's an overhaul of regulation at the airport. Heathrow is continuing to develop its plan to build a third runway after legal challenges and COVID delays. Shave Ice has criticised the airport's attempt to raise charges and its decision to limit capacity. Studies reveal that just 1 in 7 Black Friday deals offer a genuine discount. Who knew? And the vast majority of items on sale are cheaper or the same price in the 6 months before. After analysing several major online and high street retailers, the watchdog Which found that not a single item on sale was at its cheapest on Black Friday. Who would ever have guessed that? Now, twins born from embryos frozen more than 30 years ago are believed to have set a new record. Lydia and Timothy Ridgway were born at the end of last month after what their parents described as a mind-boggling experience. Their father was just 5 years old when their embryos were created in 1992. That's amazing, isn't it? Fantastic. King Charles is set to host the first state visit of his reign when he welcomes South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa to the UK. Joined now by the former UK High Commissioner to South Africa, Lord Boateng. Hello to you, my lord. Thank you for joining us on the programme this morning. Talk to us about your hopes and expectations. Talk to me about your hopes and expectations for this visit.
This is an important visit for Britain. South Africa is our major strategic partner on the continent, our biggest trade partner. Britain, too, is a major investor in South Africa, and the bonds are strong. But there are a number of key issues. Climate change, the foremost amongst them. South Africa is very heavily reliant on coal. It needs, at the same time, to see jobs created, so delivering on the outcome of the Egyptian COP will be hugely important, both for South Africa and, of course, for Britain. And it's the first in King Charles's reign. And that, too, is significant because King Charles has a long-standing relationship with Africa, built up over many years, with him making a significant contribution, of course, to the preservation of Africa's environment and wildlife.
Yeah, and of course his boy is very much involved in Africa, as well as was his former wife. There are challenges, though, aren't there? I mean, South Africa is, and I've been there very recently, they have significant problems when it comes to energy, economic stagnation as well, and the president himself is not without controversy.
I was present yesterday at South Africa House, and I think the theme for President Ramaphosa's visit will be no one left behind, that no one in South Africa should not benefit from development, that the real challenges they face should be addressed, and they see trade and investment as a very important part in that. But South Africa also demands, and rightly, respect. It won't be lectured about its stance, its neutral stance in international affairs. And it looks to Britain and the Commonwealth as equal and respectful partners. And the Commonwealth indeed provides a good context for that sense of mutual friendship, responsibility, but founded on a relationship of respect for individual sovereignty.
We very much remember Nelson Mandela coming along to have a state visit, I think back in 1996. Now, I remember him addressing both houses of Parliament at the time. That visit went down very well indeed. Can Cyril Ramaphosa expect anything along the same lines?
There was something, of course, very special about Nelson Mandela that no one can hope to emulate. But Cyril Ramaphosa is someone who's made a real contribution on the world stage and indeed to peace in Northern Ireland. He was a major interlocutor during that very difficult time in helping negotiate the peace accord with Sinn Féin. He's someone who is rightly respected as someone who understands the needs of business, who understands the importance of building a dynamic economy. So I've got no doubt that this will be a successful visit, but it needs to be a visit that is rooted in mutual respect and understanding of the challenges that the whole world faces around climate change. And the UK has an opportunity to become, for South Africa, a major strategic partner in addressing the issue of climate change. And I think it will do that.
I wonder, my lord, if you could talk to our viewers this morning about some of the controversy surrounding the Cullinan diamond, suggestions that our Queen should not wear that today, that it would cause offence to our South African friends and neighbours. What is the controversy surrounding it?
I think there just needs to be an understanding on all sides that history is a complex matter. We need, in the UK as a country, to face up to the reality of our imperial past. We need also to recognise that there is a case for the return of many of the artefacts held in our museums. I don't think the issue of a diamond in a crown is going to mar the relationship between the UK and South Africa. But I do feel that it's very important that we understand the complexities of history, that we face up to our responsibilities for some things that were wrong, and that where we can, we make adequate and proper reparation. But the key, you know, and this is what I've found both as a High Commissioner and indeed as a Cabinet Minister with responsibility for the Africa Commission, the key to good relationships going forward is respect for the past, of course, and its complexity, but above all, respect now in terms of a relationship of equals. And I think South Africa and Britain can do that. South Africa is a great country. It's been through many trials and tribulations. Britain has played its part in that. But let's not forget either that whatever British governments in the past have done, the relationship between British people and South African people has always been one that has been based on that respect. We saw that in the anti-apartheid movement when Britain and British people, whatever the government's position, when British people were the forefront of the struggle for freedom in South Africa. And we need to build on that relationship between peoples. I remember when I was High Commissioner, rugby brought people together. Sport can bring people together, and one believes and hopes that South Africa and Britain have a great future together, but one based on respect for each other's sovereignty and building a future together.
Yeah. Who are you supporting in the World Cup to that end?
I want Ghana and England to be in the finals. And if we achieve that, that would be a great thing for both England and Ghana. After that, well, it's in the hands of the gods.
Good answer. It's good to talk to you, my lord. Thank you.
Good seeing you as ever, Kay. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye. The energy regulator, Ofgem, has told 17 suppliers they must improve their approach to vulnerable customers as we head into a tough winter. Joined by the Director of Retail at Ofgem, that's Neil Lawrence. Hello to you, Mr. Lawrence. Thanks for joining us on the programme this morning. So tell me more about these companies. What are they up to?
So we know right now that customers are struggling. Energy is an essential service, and all customers, especially those most vulnerable, need to have confidence that they will be treated appropriately when they contact their energy supplier. So to drive standards up across the industry, Ofgem has undertaken its latest deep dive into vulnerable customers to assess how they're served. And today we publish those results. There's severe weaknesses across 5 suppliers, moderate weaknesses in another 5, and 7 had minor weaknesses. And undertaking that review, we've agreed action plans with all those suppliers, and they're going to deliver those action plans now. We want them to demonstrate they've taken this seriously, so that those vulnerable customers, when they contact their energy supplier, know that they get all the support that they deserve.
Yeah, how are you going to hold these companies to account? I mean, taking advantage of vulnerable customers with a long winter ahead is just not acceptable.
Yeah, absolutely. So our expectations are really clear. The suppliers should be proactively checking and recording where a customer is in a vulnerable situation. And if customers don't volunteer that information, suppliers' agents should be trained to spot the signs of vulnerability. And then they can provide them with access to all the support that is available That might include putting them on the priority service register, checking they've got access to all that government support that we really welcome. Now, ultimately, if suppliers fail to take the steps that we have agreed in those action plans, we've got further sanctions, including fines, further enforcement action, and ultimately we can take licences away if suppliers don't comply with our rules. And that's what we're going to do.
So just talk me through that in more detail.
So in terms of our next steps, every supplier has an action plan that has details of what they need to do to improve the support for vulnerable customers. And we will review their action plans with the suppliers, and where they fail to take the appropriate steps to make sure that vulnerable customers are supported, we will go through further sanctions, including fines, further enforcement action, and ultimately, if necessary, we can take licences away. All of this is part of a wider package of proactive deep dives aimed to drive standards up in the industry. Energy is an essential service, and when customers call, they deserve that service to be given to them. We've already looked at direct debits, customers in payment difficulty, and we'll report also on customer services later this year. And we also wrote to suppliers earlier this year on the PPM switching issue.
OK, yeah, but just to clarify, Mr Lawrence, how many of these that have been highlighted so far, these 7 businesses, I think it's 7, I'm just going to list them as we're talking to you. Good Energy, Outfox, SO Energy or So Energy, True Energy, Utilita, 5. How many of those, if they don't pull their socks up, might lose their licences?
Well, we treat all suppliers the same. We go through a robust process. So we're looking at all suppliers across the market.
Yeah, but you've illustrated that these are not up to scratch. So how many of these are in risk of losing their licence if they don't sort themselves out?
Well, we've agreed action plans with everybody in the industry over this issue. What we want to realise is that nobody achieved the green standard that we'd expect. And that's very important at this stage. Vulnerable customers deserve to be treated properly. Now, we are seeing that this process is working, so we are seeing suppliers take proactive action now off the back of our market-wide compliance review or deep dive approach. And we're seeing them undertake action themselves proactively, such as independent audits into direct debits, and taking an approach to proactively make sure that the processes they have in place will support customers. That's what we want to see, that proactive engagement to up the standards within the industry. That's the conversation that we want to drive. As I said, ultimately, if suppliers don't do that, we do have sanctions available to us.
Why did you not do this before?
We changed our approach earlier this year, as I said, to undertake that proactive assessment in a range of areas. That's been a change in approach. It's a welcome approach. It's aimed at driving standards up across the industry. We're looking to make sure that when customers contact their energy supplier, they get the service that they deserve. It's really important at the backdrop of the current cost of living crisis that when all customers contact their energy supplier, especially those that are in vulnerable situations, they get the service that they deserve and they get access to all the help that is available.
OK, thank you.
Thanks very much.
Tamara is here this morning. Lots for the government to face up to today, not least the fact that Keir Starmer is speaking to the CBI today. Brexit's still very much on the agenda, as is what's happening with Ofgem and companies that are not supporting people well enough. And what's this story about the Prime Minister paying for private appointments for a GP when other people are waiting a fortnight?
That's right. Story in The Guardian today saying that Rishi Sunak, who of course has talked a lot about the NHS, about how his parents were a GP and a pharmacist, said the NHS is in my blood in a speech to the CBI only yesterday. The Guardian say that he uses a private GP surgery which charges £250 for an appointment on the day. So the suggestion they're making is that while lots of people have to wait 2 weeks for an appointment, if not longer, the Prime Minister may not understand their concerns if he's able to get one straight away. Now, some Tory MPs think this story is a bit unfair, and in fact, Number 10 have not denied it. They're not commenting on it at all, in fact. And a source in government said to me that, you know, Rishi Sunak should be judged on what he's doing for the NHS. And you saw him put in £6.6 billion in the autumn statement only last week. So they're very much hitting back at the idea that you should judge people on their own personal medical choices, and they won't be commenting on his. But certainly, as the NHS is and how overstretched it is people's top concern, you can see why this story has appeared. Labour also not commenting on that story. Labour's big intervention today is actually on migration, and it's a really interesting one, actually, because Keir Starmer, who, of course, for many people was associated with wanting to stay in the EU, with having a second referendum, is actually addressing the CBI today, and he's saying the era of cheap labour is over and companies need to upskill British workers. And he says if he was Prime Minister, he wouldn't try and stop people coming to this country if they were needed. But he's saying that if businesses want more visas, then they also have to show what they're doing on skills. So it's a big move for Labour, I think, and saying that they support the current migration arrangements but just want to make them work more effectively.
And as far as this Ofgem report is concerned, some suggestions that the government should be more involved, whereas the government are saying we don't want to be a nanny state.
That's right. So Ofgem found that 17 companies had let down the most vulnerable customers, basically not fulfilled their responsibilities in terms of setting their debt repayments too high, not doing some of the things they're supposed to do for free, like gas checks or reading meters for people who can't do it themselves. So they have failed in their legal responsibilities. And you heard Liam Fox there saying, you know, Parliament will want to look at this issue. Yes, it comes in a context of the government being criticised for not wanting to tell people the measures that they can take around the home to save energy because they were afraid of, you know, looking, it backfiring on them essentially. But I'm sure MPs will want to draw a line between these companies' legal responsibilities and just helping people to save energy. But certainly the idea that at the moment when people are facing bills of thousands of pounds, that these companies aren't doing the bare minimum to help the most vulnerable customers is something that I think we can expect MPs to get quite angry about.
Yeah, tomorrow's take at 9 o'clock. Looking forward to it. Thanks very much indeed, Tamara. Thank you. Back to the World Cup now, and England have got their campaign off to a storming start. Apparently, they won 6-2. I've not mentioned it this morning. I'm joined now by England's superfan and host of the Besotted Football podcast. That's Billy Grant. Hi, Billy.
Hi, Kay. How you doing?
I am great. Tell me about the match yesterday.
Match yesterday was brilliant. I mean, I was lucky to get there, actually, because I did a bit of a roundabout route, as you do. I went to Tel Aviv and then flew in via Jordan and then into the game, and all my flights were delayed. Royal Jordanian were a complete nightmare, don't bother them. But anyway, and I got in about 2 hours before the old kickoff, and I got to my accommodation about a million miles queue, so I had to dump my bags, change myself in a storeroom, and then we got to the game 5 minutes before kickoff. So I was a little bit nervous at the time. I thought, oh my God, we're going to make kickoff. But we got there, and to be quite honest with you, the team did us proud because they started off on the front foot, scored some great goals, played some really great football. The fans were.
Oh, we are.
We've got good shakes. Like, you know, even the Iranian fans, they were really good. It's a really good evening.
Tell me what the energy was like in the stadium, Billy. Oh, I think we've lost Billy just for now. But let's bring in John Rutledge while we sort that out, a.k.a. Eggsy, of course, member of Goldie Looking Chain. Hiya.
Morning, morning. How are you?
Good morning. I am very well. Tell me about the game last night.
Powerful game. Firstly, I'd like to point out that you're speaking to the least knowledgeable football fan of the GLC, but I can say it was an incredibly powerful game. Super slow first half. We all know that. I'll be told to say this. But apparently that penalty, wow, fantastic. Bale came up with the goods. 1-1, all right. Could have been 2-1, could have been 3-1, could have been 4-1, 5-1, 6-1, but it was 1-1. Hopefully there'll be some more goals scored further down the line. So, brilliant, absolutely brilliant. A game of two halves, and they were some great halves.
Talk to me about the song.
Well, of course, as you know, Goldie Looking Chain, one of Britain's favourite moderately successful pop groups, have just released our great new tune, Football, Football, Football. Very easy to learn, very catchy. It simply goes football, 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 goals. It's a song for anyone. You could be a Wales fan, you could be an England fan, you could follow Uruguay. Any team you like, this song is for you. It's the unofficial World Cup anthem for anyone. And I tell you what, it's kicking right off at the moment.
Let's have a quick listen to the video, should we?
Go on, Kay.
Go on then.
Football, football, football. Football, 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 goal. I think it's all over. Football.
Hugely important time for Wales, isn't it? I think first time for more than 60 years that the team has got to a World Cup final. Tell me, was it that made you think, you know what, I need to make a video, or do you always make one?
Well, I think, we've done a few in the past, and at the moment, everybody's doing them these days. And we were like, should we do one? And then Reece, who put the tune together, started humming that. And Adam, who's in the band, absolutely hated it. And he's giving me a nosebleed. We're like, let's record it. And we have done. And it's out there. And it's going down well. People seem to be enjoying it. So that's great, it's just a lot of fun, and it's a good way of celebrating the fact that Wales are doing so well. As you know, Wales is the greatest country in the world, so this is a great time for people to see the full power of Wales.
Yeah, that's absolutely what Welsh people say. What do you make about Gareth Bale not wearing his One Love armband?
Well, it's up to him what decision he makes. If he wants to do that, that's fine. I'm not going to slag him off. Every man's a free man and he can do what he wants. Just remember, it's nice to be important, but it's more important to be nice, guys.
That's very true. What about the Welsh fans having their hats taken away from them? I mean, is Qatar the right place? I mean, we're getting slightly political just for a minute, but is Qatar the right place for a World Cup? For the first time Wales will be playing in 60 years. Are you glad that it's in Qatar?
Very interesting question. I think it's a question on everybody's lips at the moment, If I was putting it on, I would have done it in Newport, in the county ground. We would have had the whole thing going on there. Everybody would have been happy. But I think these FIFA lads have got their own decisions. And obviously somebody thought it would be a good idea to do it there. Up to you, mate. I haven't got any power over this. But like I said, the next World Cup, I am happy to get it organised and put it on in Newport. Just give me a call. If you work for the FA, I can sort it out. No
fantastic. How do you think Wales are going to get on against Iran? That's the next game, I think.
15-0. Bale will score them all. And with that performance, I think they'll just give us the World Cup anyway. I think that's just the nature of the game.
It's great to talk to you. Thanks so much indeed for sharing that video with us. Really appreciate it. Thanks a lot, John. I think Billy, take care. I think Billy's back with us. Hi, Billy. We lost you there. I was asking you about the mood in the stadium yesterday.
Mood was great. Mood was great. The atmosphere is fantastic. The locals were great. The Iranians were great. The English fans were great. We just really enjoyed it. I'll tell you something, and that's to say, you start off on the right foot, you have a result like that, and it just makes everyone relax. And that's what everyone did. And I had a really good time and I had a really good night.
It looked as though it was a carnival atmosphere, players relaxing, they had their sliders on, they were hugging their babies, their wives and girlfriends were with them as well. Do you think actually there in Qatar there is any feeling that it's the wrong place to be for this World Cup final, as the papers are suggesting here in the UK?
I mean, listen, we can have this conversation forever. I mean, for me, I was gutted when Qatar got the World Cup, because for me, I would have preferred to have gone to another places to go and watch the football. I'm also a little bit gutted that a lot of my friends wouldn't come out here for various reasons, either whether or not it's too expensive, they thought it was going to be, or because of various reasons, because they were, a little bit scared coming over. LGBT fans that I know were scared to come over. For those reasons, I don't know that they allayed enough fears. They didn't turn around to people and actually make them feel comfortable enough to come, which I think is a real shame. If you come out here, there are fans out here, but there aren't the droves of fans that you thought they're going to be. I think the numbers have been slightly massaged, I think, I'm saying. England fans, I don't know, maybe 2,000 fans out here, and there should be a lot more. But also the other thing is that's really riled me is I'm staying in a shipping container, right? And literally it is a shipping container. Somebody's come in, he's drilled holes in the windows, put in windows inside there, put in a bathroom, and you walked in and you think, okay, fair enough. I'm a football fan. If I've got a certain budget, I'll come and stay in here. But this shipping container, which is really badly made, and there's about, thousands of them all in the same area, like, with loads of football fans in there, it's costing like £180 a night. Now, if the World Cup really wanted to attract fans, because it's all about getting the right budget, they would have made that like £30 a night, and then it would have attracted more people over to have a really good time. So that's one of the things that's actually irked me a little bit, to say, actually, have you really thought about the fans over here? But other than that, listen, they've been very friendly. The locals have been brilliant, but the organisation is a little bit squiffy.
OK. Billy, we are out of time, but it's great to talk to you. Hopefully you'll stay in touch and we can talk to you again after the game against the US. For now, thanks so much indeed. Thanks a lot.
OK.
Yay.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
You.